Hi, I'm Michael Tabb, and welcome to StoryExpo's Masters of Story.
Talk about pre-writing your screenplay and building a foundation of story.
Well, I happen to write a book on the subject. To me, the most important part of screenwriting that most people mess up is actually what you do before you start writing. Pre-writing to me is how you put all the information together so that it's cohesive and makes sense and creates overlapping textured ideas that it feels like everything within the story is commenting on everything else within the story. So it feels like you're really dominatingly talking about the subject matter in its complete form. If you tell a story that is about Vietnam, you're going to want to hear the different stories from the soldiers' side. You're going to want to hear and feel what's going on with the hippies back home. You're going to want to see what the government is going through and the people, most importantly, who are torn between them. The whole idea of taking a subject matter and debating it from every side, but in a dramatic and exciting way, is the most important thing you can do, because everything is about what is it you're talking about? What are you trying to tell the world? And the only way to properly mount an argument is to prepare. You don't ad-lib that stuff while you're writing a script. You prepare it. You develop characters specifically designed to combat the other ideas that other characters represent within the story. You want to know what you're writing about. Otherwise, how are you going to design characters specifically to talk about whatever it is you're writing about? Everything has to be put together in a way so that it feels almost flawlessly, beautifully. You're looking through a window, through time and space, at something that is perfectly captured, that encapsulates everything you want to talk about in a way that doesn't feel unorganic. Because you write it, when you write it, you're coming up with things that, God, how do I explain this to you? I want you to get this. When you're writing something, you have to live and breathe it. It has to feel real. If people are just talking dialogue that sounds like you're making a point, then it doesn't work. You have to channel your points through specific characters, through perspective, through ideas, through characters' voices. And how do you know what their character voice is on page one if you haven't thought about this in advance? So the key to pre-writing for me is figuring out, what is it you're selling? What is it you're trying to say? Because you are selling an idea for a story for somebody to want to watch what it is you're debating. You want to put it in a genre that people are excited about. You should know your genre before you start writing the story. If you don't figure out if you're writing a thriller or a comedy, those are not the same movie at all. You could make a story about the power of love and what it does to you and how it tears you apart, and you can make that a thriller. You can make that a horror movie. You can make that a comedy. What we want to talk about is channeled through specific ideas and notions that give us a sense and a feeling that we're in hands that we can trust when we watch a story. And that means you've planned ahead and you know what you're going to be making that audience feel from the very beginning. You plan that. You plan it ahead. You plan the characters. You figure out, okay, if this is the character who has to learn what I want the audience to learn, then you need somebody to fight that. You need somebody to support that journey, because nobody goes on an inner journey because they wanted to, okay? You go on an inner journey because it's something you realize you have to do, and there has to be some sort of inspiration to get there. Why do we change? Change is too hard. We change because there's some benefit at the other end. 9 times out of 10, for me, that's love. I will change for love. That's about it. I'm not going to change who I am for anything else. And sometimes changing for someone else, that gets a bad rap. It's like you have to be true to yourself. But what if you figure out you're wrong? Change is okay if you're becoming a better person. And that's what you have to think about. You have to plan the characters meticulously. And you have to plan to create characters that would influence each other. Give them personalities and places and stature in society, so that, look, Joe Schmo is not going to listen to a Schmo who's even lower or less powerful than him about how to behave. What you're going to do is you're going to put him in the company of somebody he idolizes, and that person is telling him to be a certain way. And what if they're wrong? What if we've been following the wrong ideas all along? Well, that's what you call planning an antagonist. Everything is planned. It's choreographed. Think of it this way. When you're writing a script, there are at least 10 things that go into every single scene you write, right? There's character, there's momentum, there's change, there's background. What is the setting? What time of day is it? We're thinking about all the layers of conflict and how people are coming into it. If we get just 5 of those right on the first draft out of the 10, for example, then we're golden. We've got a good first draft. And then you're going to have to rewrite the hell out of it.
What do writers get right and wrong about conflict?
Oh, God. Writing about conflict is everything. There's this famous saying that I love that I learned at the very beginning of my screenwriting career. When I went to look, if I know anything, it's because I went to the best schools for film in the country. I am not a brilliant person by nature or by birth. What happened is I went to USC for a couple of years, transferred to NYU Tisch, graduated from Tisch School of the Arts, and then went back to UCLA School of Film and Television. If I know anything, it's because of these things that I have learned from other great teachers. And I learned actually from the people who are lecturing at this symposium that is coming up in New York, so don't miss it. Now, I totally went off track there. But the point is here's the thing you have to remember about conflict and the importance and what people don't understand. One is that you need 3 things in every scene. The first thing you need in every scene is conflict. Now, the second thing you need in every scene, just to give you an idea of what the other things that are as important as conflict are, the second thing is conflict. And the third thing you need in every scene out of the 3 things is conflict. So the misnomer is that you can have a scene that is about establishing some kind of information or exposition in a scene without it being surrounded or entailing some kind of conflict. It doesn't have to be big conflict. You can start off and it's minor conflict or it's personal conflict, but there's no global stakes to it yet or anything, right? You could start with that. But the idea is that, one, there has to be conflict in every part of the story. If you're giving information in a scene that there's no conflict, cut that scene and put that information into a scene that does already have conflict in it. Or add conflict to the scene you created if you want that scene that badly. You need to add some textured layer of somebody fighting for something against something. What makes television or film fascinating is the battle to achieve. And that's what we do all of our lives. You and me, we're fighting for love, trying to find somebody to spend the rest of our lives with who will love us. Or for some people, 20 people. Everybody's got their own thing. But that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something. Somebody wants success. They want a certain job title. They want a certain amount of money. Nothing comes easy. And if it came easy, it sure as hell wouldn't be entertaining. Our job is to do 2 things for me when we write a story: entertain and enlighten. Entertaining has to do with conflict. It's one of the core principles of drama. And believe it or not, comedy is also drama. It's just drama you can laugh at. Whenever anybody tells you whatever their genre is that they're writing in, it means drama with that flavor added on top of it. Everything is conflict. Conflict is drama, and drama is in every single genre. It is the foundation of every story we tell, no matter what kind of story you're writing. So the biggest misnomer that would be about conflict is that it doesn't have to really be there, that it can just be a happy-go-lucky time. And look, I want to be happy as much as everybody, but we all know what engages us is the fight to achieve something. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother trying.
How important is the mixing and merging of genres?
I find, okay, you're talking about a topic here. When you talk about mixing genres and what goes with what and how many genres you can put in there, it's a very difficult subject to tackle because a lot of people think of it differently. So I'm going to start by saying one thing. Nobody's right, okay? There is a right way to do everything. And then there are times it just goes wrong. I am a big believer in focusing on a singular genre so the audience comes to whatever it is you're watching, whatever it is you're writing and creating for the world, they know what they're going to get. And that way, if you really get into one genre, then the audience will be satisfied if that's what you focused on for the whole movie or for the whole story. Because you promised them a thriller, they were thrilled, you did your job. Now, I believe that you can put together two genres, but the two genres should really meet somewhere beautifully in the middle so that they comment on each other. There are certain genres that go beautifully together. Thrillers and horror, obviously, are all dark and are about sitting on the edge of your seat, right? Um, Westerns work great with road movies because Westerns are about a simpler time and how still they manage to get things done and accomplished and grown and create society in a world that was vastly unsettled. And we know what America's become. And so that road through the great wilderness, when you're heading out west, there's something eminently beautiful and epic in scope that fits precisely within the groundwork of what you would make as a Western. Because the whole idea of the Western is this great unsettled West where things are epically tragic because there are no laws that people are applying a lot of the time, or they have laws, but they can't really uphold them. And the law is few and far between. So the idea of going on this epic journey, it's also epic journeys in themselves. Road trips go well with almost every genre because every story is about somebody going on an epic journey. So really, you could talk about a road movie, and that goes with everything because all journeys are about going from one place to another. If not in the outside world as the metaphor, on the inside of us. On the inside, we're always going through an inner journey. But for me, the minute you get past making two major genres as the main theming of the story, it doesn't mean it makes a good or bad movie. I want to make this very clear. Like, for example, there are movies like I love Scott Pilgrim versus the Universe, right? Or the World, or whatever they called it that wasn't the comic book. I loved the movie, but that movie is kind of sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's romance. It was so many different things that they didn't know how to sell it, and it didn't make a lot at the box office and movie theaters, even though it's a wonderful movie to watch, extremely entertaining. You know, the same thing happened in the 70s. They tried to make a Western, but it was also a comedy, but it was also a road trip. It was called The Frisco Kid, one of Harrison Ford's earliest films he did with Gene Wilder, which that's a great pairing. But because it was so many things, again, people didn't go see it. You focus on two and you make it about two genres. And don't get me wrong, just because you pick two genres doesn't mean you don't. If your two genres, say, are science fiction and action, right? Those go really well together. That doesn't mean you can't have a sense of humor. That doesn't mean you can't spruce some comedy in there. Of course you can. We're watching characters. The whole idea of writing is holding up the mirror to life and giving people a sense of this could be real. Though, so what we're talking about and writing about is engaging. We're not engaged if it doesn't feel that there's some sense of humanity in it. And humanity has a sense of humor. And if it doesn't, I don't want to be around it. You got to laugh at stuff. So don't, just because you've picked one or two main genres that you're going to focus your story on that goes out into the void, that doesn't mean that you can't tiptoe and, play in other genres. Just remember, don't focus on the feeling that genre gives you. Allow it to exist as it would in real life, but don't focus on it. You focus on the genre that you are selling, because that's what the audience goes to the movie for. When you go to a movie theater, you don't go to a movie theater and go, do I want to see a comedy or do I want to see a comedy or a thriller? No, you get there and you kind of know what you want. I came to the movies because I want to see a big action thing today. I want something that has a reason to be on the big screen that I can't watch at home and have the same experience. So you're going to go and you're going, oh, this weekend I got to see Fast and Furious 20 or Iron Man Back from the Dead for the third time in Iron Man 57. And Robert Downey is in his walker coming. I'm coming, Pepper. The idea is, you got to know what you're selling. You got to know what your idea is. You got to know what your kind of movie is, and just stay in that lane. But play. And remember, there are no rules. You can bring in whatever the hell you want. In the end, it works if it works. People will tell you can't do things all the time in this business in your scripts. They will. And the truth is that they're right and they're wrong. Because there's always a right way to do something the way nobody's ever done it. And the question is whether you found it or not.
There are a lot of sequels these days, some good, some not so good. What is it about certain characters that make it possible to tell more than one good story about them?
Well, a great character is infinite. I mean, people think of movies and think of sequels and think that, oh, well, that means it was particularly. Every character should be that good. I mean, what is television? Television, you don't sell television based on a story. You get one plot idea, but the truth is, people keep watching television episodes because the characters are fascinating. See, TV does one thing really beautifully well when it's done right, and that is it creates a character that you are willing to sit and watch them in any kind of circumstance. So you don't come back and watch the episode again and again, episodes for 3 seasons long because they're solving one story. A story can last as short as an episode, but the character is what they come back for in television. And that's eternal. If you come up with a great character, you can ride that to infinity and beyond. Just ask Buzz Lightyear. I'm sorry. No, it's important that following characters is a pleasure, but it only works actually if you've done the pre-writing part of it and you've figured out who they are. You have to hit the ground running when you introduce a character. You have to know who they are, know what their flaws, know what they got to learn, know what they're going after, and know whether they're going to succeed or not. It doesn't matter because it's about the pursuit. People talk about, you think you have to have a happy ending. There was this rumor going around for, God, at least 10 years during the 90s into the millennium that, and it keeps coming back every couple generations, that people just want a movie with a happy ending. Bull. Sometimes people don't realize that a happy ending doesn't necessarily mean that the protagonist achieves their goal. Sometimes the happy ending is them realizing, I don't want to be this way anymore. If you told the Darth Vader story, his redemption at the end of turning and changing sides and not doing what he was there to do, which is start the Empire, is actually, that's a good ending. A happy ending is a satisfying ending, not necessarily the emotion of happiness. A happy ending is an experience that is fully realized, that gives us some kind of emotional, visceral conclusion to a question that we've been asking for the whole story. It doesn't have to be what you think it's supposed to be at the beginning. This person wants this job at the beginning of the story, and they're going to fight their way and claw their way up the ladder and betray everybody they have to, stab who they have to in the back to get there. But they are going to be the CEO of this company, and that's their mission the whole movie. And you know what they should realize halfway through the movie? No, not halfway, 3/4 of the way through the movie, is everything they've done is wrong. And at the end of the second act, which is 3/4 of the way into the story, they're going to get fired from the company entirely. Them not getting that promotion that they set out for is not going to make it an unhappy ending. What they have to do is realize how to do this. And they may wind up forming their own company, and it may be small, but they're finally having the impact they want to have. And they should realize that what I didn't want was the promotion maybe, but what I really wanted was the ability to be seen and heard and do something important with the job that I'm doing. And the truth is, sometimes people struggle for something more than what they have just because they want to say, not because they necessarily need that whole dream. Life is complicated, and so is storytelling. And storytelling is about life. It's not about, there are mythical journey structures, of course, and they're brilliant, but they're just an idea. A truly amazing movie or story that will ripple through your life and your consciousness and affect you is a kind of story where you have characters that don't achieve necessarily the happy ending that they think that they're after from the beginning, but they learn something that changed what they wanted from the beginning. That's an education. That's what real life is full of. That's a real journey. So don't think that you have to have an ending like other people tell you. Again, no rules. Find your way to make it work the way you want to tell it.
Do you need to figure out the ending of a long form television series before beginning to write a spec pilot episode?
That's a great question, actually, because, well, the plain answer is no. Of course not. A lot of people start writing, like they didn't know where Lost was going to end when they started it. Damon Lindelof will tell you all the time. He's like, damn, all this has to pay off. I got to figure that out. Personally, I like to, though. I like to plan things by the season. And I like to figure out what that first season is about. So I have kind of a focus for the characters and what they're going to learn and their arcs and how they're going to grow. But sometimes they don't do that. They just put a giant story in kind of this distant arc. And for all the seasons put together, they're just working their way towards a character learning something or becoming a better person or becoming a better leader, you know? I'm a big fan of figuring things out ahead of time, but I also believe that you can only see so far into the future unless you're doing a limited series and you're only going for 3 or 4 seasons. You can figure that out, I guess, ahead of time. And you always have a sense of where it's going because if you didn't, you don't know what you're writing about. The whole idea of telling a story is that you're trying to say something that means something to you, something that the world needs to hear, that they freaking don't understand. Otherwise, you wouldn't be writing it. We don't have an impulse to write something unoriginal. We want to write something original, something that's about something new. And you have to give it time to go. But if you don't know what the story is about and where you're going, at least at the end of the first season, for me, then what are you writing about that whole season? So I like to think a season ahead at least, but not necessarily the whole show where it's going to be. Because if you don't, how do you know where to start episode 1 if you don't know where the first season is ending? Because usually what makes storytelling feel like it's orchestrated beautifully and written beautifully is that there's this kind of symmetry from the beginning of the first episode to the end of the last episode in that first season. And if you don't give us the feeling that we've been on a journey where we've realized something and we've learned something from these characters and the crazy circumstances we put them in, then there's no reason to come back for second seasons. I believe that's why so many shows have done well in season 1 and then they trail off, is because they haven't figured out an ending to the first season that got people so excited that it makes them want to come back and see what they're going to do the next season. Or other people fear that you've given them so much closure at the end of the first season that they have no reason to come back. See, at the end of the first season, I want to pay off what happened in the pilot. But I also want to end by raising a question that makes them go, oh my God, this is 10 times worse than anything we experienced in season 1 at all. Now I got to come back because all they did is wake the sleeping monster. So as long as you write to keep the show growing, it's okay not to know all the way down the line. I just like to know where I'm going for the immediate future. You have an episode arc and you have a season arc, and that should be leading you. And at the end of the season, you should have learned one thing, but at the very end of it, you're raising a completely different question that you can only ask after you taught them what you taught them in season 1. So it completely relates to everything you did in season 1, only it asked a bigger question now at the end of that, now that you've done it. Because you can ask a question about what the right thing to do is this situation. And then at the very end of it, you can find out he did the right thing. They did the thing that they were supposed to do. But in the end, by doing the right thing, this is going to kill 70,000 people. And you may realize, oh my God, if this goes forward, now you have to realize that you're asking a different question, is how many people are okay to sacrifice for the greater good? And it would just be a different thing. Or maybe the hero at the end has to sacrifice themselves for whatever they believe in. And they're going to go, oh my God, what's going to happen next season? And they're trying to bring them back to life. They do a lot of cliffhangers at the end of seasons. Anyway, so no, you don't have to have the end of the full show completely, but I like to have a picture of it. There's no right answer. There's your answer. There's explore and ask questions. Make lists of ideas for where the show may go. And the questions you're asking at the beginning of the show, what questions does answering that question raise? Because every answer to a question raises another question. Let's not forget what it's like to be a kid. You tell a kid, do this, then what's the next question? Why? They're always going to ask why. What happened? And then what? And then what? your job as the writer is to understand that the questions never end. And if you have fantastic characters to follow, you don't need to know where it's going, because where it's going is where this character who people love are going to follow anyway. So make it about people, not about the end.
What is the purpose of exposition, and what's the best way to deliver it?
Okay, exposition is one of those things that upsets a lot of readers and a lot of development executives. You do not want a script that reads like you are explaining things to the reader. So here's the key to not do that. One, the only time you explain something to the audience at all is if literally you cannot go another second in your story without revealing that thing, or the story is stuck. You don't give people a heads up before you get there. You don't need a heads up. You need to get there, and you need to be forced to a fork in the road, and then a choice has to be made. And then if something is coming out of a situation that demands an answer in the moment, or you can't move forward, that it stops being an explanation. What it becomes in that moment is a reveal. You reveal something that somebody may have already known, but they were afraid to tell them until this moment in the story because of what it can mean. And usually that information can badly implicate people around them. It can put them in trouble, and that's why they kept it a secret. So it's like, you don't find out this person has done horrible things at the beginning of the story. You don't find out until you're already in business with them. And now, holy crap, I'm tied to this character, and this character has done these horrible things. Should I forgive them? But now I'm in a situation where I can't continue without them. You see what I mean? You raise questions only when you need to raise them. You give information only when it's the most backbreaking to do so. Don't tell people things that they don't need to know yet. That's the key to good exposition, is it comes out literally in moments where that information has no choice but to come out, or people are going to die, or they're going to lose whatever it is they set out to do. Then at that moment, of course, somebody's going to say something. They're going to tell you something, just because otherwise they've lost. So the key is, when you really want to reveal something, have some stakes involved in the revealing of that information, so that any reveal of information that comes out affects how that scene is going to end and how the story moves forward from that moment on. If it doesn't have that kind of strong impact on the story, it doesn't belong there. Pull it out and find out where that information does come into the story, so that it does change everything when it happens. And all of a sudden the character has to change their tack. They have to change their approach to whatever the problem is. And it can change the way they feel about the people they're working with or they're working against. Some of the best information is when you find out the bad guy's not so bad. And oh my God, I'm actually having to take down somebody who's trying to do a good thing. That's 10 times more riveting than a bad guy who's just bad and mustache twirly. We have to always see all the stories from everybody's perspectives, but that's a totally different question.
How do you make sure that your intention for subtext doesn't get lost on the reader while still leaving room for the director and the actors?
Subtext is literally what I think is the most difficult execution-based type of writing that has to exist to up your game, to show that you are not just, oh God. Subtext is one of those things that separates the boys from the men and the little girls from the women. Subtext means you are writing a scene that is delivering what is happening on multiple layers. They're saying one thing and it means another, and it affects the relationships in yet another. And how do you keep other people from not getting it? You can't. Some people are stupid. That's a horrible thing to say, but it's true. Some people ain't going to get it, and you're going to have to explain it to them. Our job is to be smarter than everybody. That's why we orchestrate the story. Your job is to know things they don't know. That's why they need you to write it. Otherwise, they can just write their own stories. They have an idea. I want to make this story happen. Why aren't they writing it? Because we can create subtext. Because we can create dynamic, emotional, visceral reactions that happen inside characters that affect us as audience members to feel those things. They don't know how to manipulate in that way. And writing subtext is one of the greatest ways to show how frickin' brilliant you are as a writer. You know, as simple as the end of When Harry Met Sally is. I love the end because at the end, the cheesy thing is for her to say, I love you, Harry. We've been waiting for her to say that the whole fucking movie. Excuse the language. We've been waiting for her to say that the whole movie. Aren't we? All right. So at the end of When Harry Met Sally, she says, I hate you, Harry. I hate you. You make it impossible not to hate you. The subtext of that, of course, is I love you and I can't stand living without you. If you just said that, it would have been cheeseball. But no, even at the end of a romantic comedy, they take something and you're heading towards a way, and the regular way of saying it is I love you. That is the cheesiest, crappiest way to end a love story. I'm sorry. It's just cheap. It's not funny. It has no personality. It doesn't tell us who the characters are unless it's really important that this character has never used the word love before. I've written a script where the character will not tell anybody they love them, their friends, their family, because they've been abused their whole life emotionally. And at the end, the kind of emotional heartbreak that happens in opening yourself up to tell somebody how you feel about them when you've been hurt so much, that's a beautiful, devastating moment to encapsulate. And then you can have them do something that seems cliche if throughout the whole frickin' movie, they have fought to protect themselves, that they have these walls. 9 times out of 10, we're all of us as people, we're looking to achieve goals and find love. That's why movies are about violence and survival and love, because those are the two things we all understand are the things that we would do anything to fight for, is life and love. We will change for it. We would do anything to achieve what we want for our life. And in the end, the whole idea is that you can't just say what the character wants because it's boring. Do you want to be boring? Do you want to sell your script? Then don't just have characters say exactly what they're thinking. That's the worst. Subtext is the key to great writing. And no, they're not always going to get it. And sometimes you're going to have to explain it to them. But your job is to be smarter than everybody else in the room. Your job is when they give you a note and they tell you to change something, is you don't change. 99% of the time, they will tell you how to change something. And 99% of the time, they're right. You need to change something. And 99% of the time, they are wrong in how they tell you to change it. Because only you can really figure out the right way to execute what is wrong and changing it to what is right for the story that you have written, because nobody understands it like you do. So listen to people when they give you notes, when they say something's not working, then listen to whatever suggestions they have. And remember, your job as the writer is to always beat the note. I totally went off track.
That's okay.
Is that okay?
That's good.
All right.
What are your 3 best tips for creating authentic dialogue?
The key to creating authentic dialogue is there's actually one key to creating authentic dialogue, and that is to truly develop the personalities and the goals that tie to those personalities for each character in the scene. It's not enough that they want 2 different things. What makes dialogue pop is that it's through the specific voice of a specific character who talks in a certain way. Everything is 10 times more interesting when you have a character who is very definitive answering any kind of question. You don't want normal answers. You don't want anything written the way you've heard it before. That's called cliche writing. What you want is, for me, the authenticity of great dialogue in a scene is always grounded in having characters with very specific personality choices. I even sometimes come up with words that are specific to that character that I don't let other characters use in the story, because that's just part of ingrained in who they are. They have this tact for how they do something, and they explain it in a way that is very unique, and nobody else uses it because that's who this character is. And the idea is, if you want to write authentic dialogue, is you write authentic characters who feel real, who feel specific, and feel like they speak their own version of the language everybody else is speaking. No two people talk exactly the same. Even twins will sometimes say something different because everybody's life experience is different. So the truth is, you can say three things are important. One thing is important. There are obviously a lot of dialogue mistakes. If you want to look up dialogue mistakes, David Trottier wrote this incredible list of the 7 deadly dialogue sins. Look them up. They're in at least volume 7 of his book, The Screenwriter's Bible. But there are lots of things you can do that mess up dialogue. But to get really good dialogue, not just say what's not good, what targets great dialogue is great character and being specific about who they are and how they go about getting what they want and how they would verbalize it.
What's the most important advice you can offer for someone adapting material to TV or film?
Adapting, I've done a lot of adapting in my life. I've been paid to adapt plays, books, games, board games, toys. Everybody comes, 90% of the business you're going to find out is people paying you to write something. There's a reason why the world is flooded with unoriginal material. That you get sequels and prequels and remakes of best pictures and adaptations of books, and that's what they pay us for mostly. The job is we make other people's dreams come true. We write something for us that gives people an example of what we do. We write on spec. But 99% of the time, those scripts go nowhere. I've been very lucky. I've sold a few projects that I just wrote for me. But that you can't expect that to happen. What usually happens is that somebody else reads something of yours that they really like, and they're like, you know what? That's a really good idea. If I use that perspective, that writer's style on this totally unoriginal idea, well, I could make it original again, maybe. I can make it unique. I can make it stand out from the pantheon of all the other things that people are creating and all the other different versions of this that they've made. I feel like I'm answering another question, but it's important that they're tied together. And that is that originality stems from you, and that comes across in your personal scripts just so they can pay you to write something totally unoriginal. But because you've shown them that you can write with personality and character and a unique style all your own, they're expecting you to bring what is so special about you and what you write original, and they want you to bring that to ideas that already exist so that they can make money off of them again because they already own them.
To understand talent, you need to have talent. Do you really think the best films proposed are the ones being put on screen?
Oh, God, no. But the writers don't choose what goes on screen. The writers are hired magicians, and we get brought in to create worlds and ideas or basically bring them back to life from some other form that they'd been created in before. Like I said, I think the most genius stories that are being written are the original stories being crafted by writers that aren't based on content that already exists. I think there's always a way to make content that has already existed really interesting in a new way, of course. And I'm not poo-pooing adaptations. It's a very cool thing. But for me, the best stories are always the ones that are rarely made because they're unique to the writer, they're unique to the world that they're sitting in. They're 100% from the heart of a human being, not from something else out there. Because when it comes from the person who's an individual who's telling a story, it's because they lived a whole life nobody else has experienced. You, the writer, have lived a life that nobody else can possibly fathom your experiences because they didn't. Only you did. And because of that, when you write a story, if you tap into your soul and the life experiences that you've gone through and the things you've learned, because you've learned things in ways nobody else has because your experiences are as unique as your fingerprint. That's going to always, for me, create the most evocative, personal, and moving idea for a story, because whatever idea it is, it's not saddled with pre-expectation of what that's supposed to be because there's some pre-existing thing that happened. It's the originality in idea, for me, that always winds up blowing us away. That's why movies that shake the movie business are things like Star Wars. Nobody made a frickin' movie like Star Wars. Same thing with The Matrix. Nobody had conceived a world like The Matrix like that. Not like that. Not that we'd ever seen. The movies that are the most brilliant, the most satisfying, are the completely original stories we've told. And there's always a struggle to get those movies made because the movie business was bought by a bunch of conglomerate organizations. You know, now TV shows are produced not just by a movie studio, but that movie studio is owned by a major corporation. Their bottom line is dollars. Well, how do you make sure that you're going to make a lot of money? Well, if I base this on something that's already very popular, they're going to make a lot of money on it, they think. They think they've stacked the deck in their favor. They're positive they're going to make more on something like Fast and Furious 10 than somebody would ever think they would probably be making Avatar Part 1. Even though it's different, it's more original, it's wild, it has all these things, but Part 10 of Fast and the Furious has this huge following. Avatar was an original world created by James Cameron that was so visceral and wildly original. And at the same time, he deals with the ideas that we all wrestled with in learning about the world the way it happened. Look, I've written movies about this also, so it's really important. Avatar is really about Western colonization and the destruction of indigenous tribes. How one power bulldozes another, tries to bulldoze other powers to take something over and make it theirs. He did it in a way that was beautiful and fantastic. I have a version of it that I've written with my buddy Peter Hyoguchi, and that one is all about 100-foot-tall cyclopses. But it's the same kind of story. It's about something big and visceral, but it's original. The characters were original. And when we don't know what to expect, and you're going to a planet with flying pieces of land hovering over the world and giant blue aliens that are 10 feet tall, you're going to be fascinated because you've never freaking seen it before. Originality is hard to come by, and finding people who will invest in it is equally difficult.
Whether it's Mission Impossible, Iron Man, or even Uncut Gems, why do studios insist on putting a love story in every movie?
Love stories are crucial, whether you realize it or not, and the reason why is twofold that people should understand about. Not the reason, but you need to understand two things about love stories. First is that it's not always about romantic love, and two is that the love story is specifically geared 9 times out of 10 to help the character arc along. Like I said, the only reason a character goes through an emotional change is for one of two reasons. Their life is on the line, or love is on the line. Love is the great motivator for human change. So 9 times out of 10, when you're writing a love story into something, and most of them don't realize they're looking for a love story, but they don't know what they're asking for is they want somebody there motivating the protagonist to go about their journey on the inside, their change. They need somebody who is there kind of, for example, if there's a male character and he is in love with this woman, but she isn't going to kiss him as long as he's acting like a scoundrel, and he realizes he has to be a better person to get the girl who he's really attracted to, he's going to try to be a better person because people we care about are more important than how we see ourselves. And believe it or not, that's one of the most beautiful things about human nature, is that we can learn to value somebody above ourselves and give that pause and let that fill us up inside. So one thing, a love story reminds us that we change for something bigger than ourselves. We change to be worthy of something. We want to be better. I want to be loved. And I'm willing to do what I have to have the love of somebody I love. And if I realized that acting in a certain way was making me unattractive to people, that's an important thing to realize. If being a jerk isn't going to get me anywhere, love stories really do tell us what the journey of a character is about, because it's that love that's going to get them to change. And the other thing I wanted to say is a lot of people think when they say add a love story that it means romance, that they're asking for sex. Sometimes they are. But the truth is that love stories are so much more than romance. Sometimes the love story, the influence of love, is that of a child inspiring a parent, or a parent being inspired to be a better teacher, to be a better role model, to be a better person, to take care of other people. The idea is love stories remind us that life is about how we treat the other people in our life. And that is something we should always be talking about in every movie or in every story, because that's the most important thing in the whole wide world.
Do you think wokeness and political correctness will have an influence on future TV and film projects?
I think everything impacts everything. We are in a singular universe where there are tides that are constantly affecting how the sand is going to sit on that beach. And of course, it's going to affect it. How long it affects, how big the wake is, how long the change lasts, and how long they hold on to the kind of stringent ideas they have now when it becomes more fluid and more natural. That is all things that only time can tell. But when there is a cultural shift, there is a shift in the entertainment that is created for that culture. Because we are always creating culture for now. Even if you're writing a period movie, when you're writing a movie that's set in the far past or set in the far future, we're still writing for the audience that's going to watch it today in the movie theater when it goes up on the screen. You're not writing about what happened back then, even if it's set back then. You're making a comment on today. Otherwise, you're making that movie at the wrong time in history. And there's no point in telling it. So yeah, it's going to always affect the now. The question is for how long and in what way it changes and in what ways it grows. Because that's humanity. That's us holding up the mirror to mankind and showing a face its own visage. It's that old Shakespeare quote.
Just so I get one more in here.
As many as you want.
Do you have anything that you wanted to answer in particular?
Please don't forget to buy Pre-Writing Your Screenplay, a step-by-step guide to generating stories, which is my book. It tells you step-by-step how to go from zero to story in one set of directions, and everything leads to another thing, leads to another thing, so that literally you're answering questions that are asked, but constantly you're being given the answer because of the way you ask the questions and in what order. So be sure to pick that up. That's all.
That's good. I'll use that, actually. Okay, let me just ask you this on love story. Is it possible to write a love story that does not contain a power struggle?
Yes, it's possible to write a love story that is not about a power struggle, but it's not possible to write a interesting love story without struggle, period. It can be a different kind of struggle other than power. I think sometimes people it's not, I mean, a lot of people will classify everything as a power struggle. Like somebody's trying to get one up on somebody else, or they're trying to maintain control of a situation because they're guarded, or they're trying to control the situation so they don't feel so vulnerable and don't feel taken advantage of. And there's a lot of that happens in real life. But in the end, I don't like to think of things in terms of, it's a personal thing for me. I don't like to think about relationships as in a power dynamic. I believe that every struggle for a character is in their soul and people trying to be who they need to be their best versions of themselves. And I don't think that that's about power. I think that's about self-realization, about self-exploration. It's about going on a journey where only you can find out where you're going through experiencing it by yourself or with somebody else, but you have to go through it. And we are all always going through the gauntlet of difficult situations. And you can say we are only struggling because we are struggling with something that has power over us, to influence us, to knock us off our path, or some impulse that has power over us and makes us act in a certain way, like ego. But in the end, I try to strip that for me emotionally out of it and just make it about a character trying to do a thing that makes his world better. And if in the end, making his world better makes things worse for somebody else, if it's somebody we want to like, make them realize that maybe they don't want that so much. It's not about power. It's about being simpatico with the human race. It's about finding peace. Peace has many different angles. It has many different interpretations, and people talk about world peace. But the truth is that peace is just kind of a calm understanding of existence that can coexist with all the elements around it. And what gives us peace, what gives us calm, what gives us satisfaction, what makes us feel good that we've been able to accomplish it. For me, it's not about beating somebody else. It's always about just me being who I want to be. That's why when you write a character, I never write a character whose goal is to beat somebody else. That's about power. For me, it's about a person trying to do what they want, that they think is the best thing to be themselves. So regardless of the fact that they are racing against this person, they're not trying to beat this person, they're just trying to win. They have to have a positive end goal for themselves in mind. And their goal is not based on putting somebody else down or bringing somebody else up. It's about what they're searching to try to accomplish. And I think that makes our characters better and more clear human beings than living to in reaction to something else. They need to live with their own direction.
Can you think of a movie that made you cry and why it touched you so much emotionally?
I can think of a lot of movies that made me cry. I'm a sap. Of course, things like this beautiful sci-fi movie by Alfonso Cuarón called Children of Men. Such a powerful movie, and it's one of those stories that you don't see what's coming. It just keeps spiraling and spiraling, and just when you think can't possibly get worse, it gets worse. Oh my God. It's one of those great sci-fi movies. It doesn't scream, look, it's a sci-fi movie. It's space, it's lasers. No, it's not that kind of sci-fi movie. It's a grounded sci-fi movie about humanity. Of course, In the Name of the Father was one of those movies that made me sob. Daniel Day-Lewis makes me sob. He makes me sad sometimes. He's so damn good. Anything with loss, anything where you see somebody is never going to be able to accomplish what they want to be makes me sad. Of course, things where I'm a father, so anytime you have a parent who is struggling with taking care of, making sure their children are okay, I'm going to be emotionally totally gripped because I know that feeling. And the truth is that it's always personal. It just has to be something deeply personal, something I feel, and as long as it's deeply human. And that's why love, again, is one of those things that studios like having in movies, is because when we realize we have love, that's when we realize what's important, and that's what affects us the most deep. We are going to cry if it touches us in a way that we understand about something we love, because there's nothing more important to us individually than love and our relationships with the people that we love. So it's usually grounded in love. It may not be romantic love, but it's love. Love's the answer.
And then finally, tell us a little bit about Masters of Story, what you're looking forward to, and what you think you're going to talk about.
The Masters of Story by StoryExpo is going to be absolutely astounding. Don't you dare miss it. You must be there in the flesh. No, okay. Sorry, that was really loud and really silly. I can be silly. That's just... The Masters of Story by StoryExpo is going to be one of the best gathering of minds of people who understand storytelling that I have personally ever witnessed in my life. I have never seen an expo, a writers' conference, where they brought together multiple major story gurus talking about their approach to storytelling. Because the truth is, great writing is not about one method or another method. I have a method. I don't expect anybody else to follow my method exclusively, but you should read it. But you need to read everybody else's who's going to be there. Everybody there who's talking is a method you should read, because what you're going to do is you're going to find something from the great Robert McKee that is going to hit you where it hurts, and you're going to go, oh my God, I need to think about that every time I create a story, and it's going to stick with me. Then you're going to get something from John Truby, who is another genius of story. And then, of course, Christopher Vogler, who is the great modern interpreter of the hero's journey, and all of it was from The Hero of a Thousand Faces from Joseph Campbell, which is a follow-up on Aristotle's ideas. Chris is one of the greatest structuralists living today. And then you've got me. No, but the truth is that every one of these guys that are speaking at this conference are literal geniuses and the best and some of the most renowned voices in the craft of screenwriting in the world. Not in LA, which is a big place, but the world. They are books. They have books. They are published. They are known. I'm published by the #1 publisher in literally the world, which is Taylor and for textbooks, which is Taylor and Francis UK, but also in America with Routledge. These guys are all published by the great publishers who do great textbooks, who they're the biggest voices in storytelling. If you don't come to this event, maybe you should ask yourself if you really want to be a great writer. I've been Michael Tabb. It's been a pleasure to meet you. I can't wait to see you again.